Have you ever wondered why society is so afraid of those who choose silence? Why does the simple act of stepping away from the noise feel so threatening to a world that runs on distraction? From an early age, we were taught that being alone means failure, that if no one notices you, you have no worth. We grew up believing loneliness is emptiness, when in truth, it might be the opposite. Alan Watts once said that silence is never really empty. It's full of life, possibility, and presence. But we've been conditioned to see that silence as something dangerous. What if the emptiness you fear isn't absence at all, but a hidden passage, one that very few dare to walk? Because loneliness reveals what distraction hides, and when someone faces that truth head-on, they begin to free themselves from what once controlled them, the rush, the neediness, the constant hunger for approval. That kind of person isn't easy to manipulate, and that's exactly why the system fears those who walk alone. This video isn't a manual on how to feel better. It's a call to those who already know the noise doesn't fill the void. A call to those who sense there's a quiet truth waiting to be heard. Because this path, the path society fears you'll discover, might be the very thing that sets you free. Since childhood, we've been told that being alone means something is wrong. When a child isolates themselves, adults immediately ask if they're sad. We grow up carrying this automatic association. Alone equals broken. But maybe the mistake lies in that very idea. Schopenhauer once said that a brilliant mind seeks solitude, not out of misanthropy, but because clarity lives there. Yet we've been trained to believe the opposite, that silence is emptiness, when in fact it's raw power. Today, the promise of connection is everywhere. Social media, notifications, groups, comments. It feels like we never have to be alone again. But there's a hidden cost. The more noise surrounds us, the less space we have to listen to what we truly feel. It's like being surrounded by voices all the time, and realizing none of them are your own. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in Meditations that man retreats into solitude not to escape, but to return to himself. That kind of return doesn't fit into a feed. The analogy is simple. We live in houses so loud that we forget what our own thoughts sound like. That noise, disguised as social life, becomes emotional crutch because thinking is work, feeling is risky, and being alone requires courage. Since no one taught us how to be present without an audience, we confuse silence with emptiness. But emptiness is not the absence of life. It's only the absence of distraction. And that's when everything begins to shift. When the external noise fades, something inside wakes up. At first, it feels strange, almost unbearable, as if you're exposed to yourself for the first time. But if you don't run back to the noise, you'll find something precious there. The seed of personal truth, waiting for silence to let it grow. And that's when the next discomfort shows up. Not as enemy, but as an open door inward. When silence comes, it can be terrifying. Unlike distraction, it doesn't cover, it reveals. The mind, once numbed by endless notifications and shallow chatter, begins to speak loudly. And what it says isn't always pretty. Regret, guilt, memories buried for years, all of it surfaces. That's why most people flee, not from silence itself, but from what silence exposes. Alan Watts said the emptiness we fear isn't a void to be filled, but a fertile space the mind resists entering. But there's a turning point. When you stop running, when you let the discomfort breathe, something shifts. The chaos begins to organize. Fear loosens its grip. I remember spending 3 days without distractions, away from my phone, away from the endless flood of information. At first it felt unbearable, like I had lost a part of myself. But by the 3rd day, memories I had avoided for years began to return, not to wound me, but as if my soul whispered, "Now you can look." That was one of the most liberating moments of my life. In this light, loneliness doesn't break you, it reveals you. It shows the cracks you've been holding together with emotional duct tape. And once you see them, you have 2 choices. Close your eyes or start rebuilding. And rebuilding doesn't ask for speed, only honesty. Sometimes it starts with something as small as sitting quietly and admitting, "I'm not okay, but I'm here." That alone can change everything. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes refuge. And peace doesn't come because everything is fixed. It comes because you stopped running. You started listening. That kind of listening offers a freedom no noise could ever give. But the world outside will still try to pull you back, because the next step might be the most dangerous of all. There's something profoundly threatening about a person who doesn't need applause to exist, someone who doesn't seek approval, doesn't bow easily. And for a system that survives on silent obedience, that's dangerous. Nietzsche wrote that the free spirit is one who can walk alone without needing constant validation. That kind of freedom terrifies society, because those who embrace solitude consume less, submit less, question more. And in silence, they don't find emptiness, they find clarity. Think about it. How do you manipulate someone who doesn't crave validation? How do you sell urgency to someone who's learned how to wait? The system feeds on your fear of falling behind. But when you embrace silence, you begin to realize there is no race. And that recognition alone is liberating. You begin to observe the world from the outside, rather than begging to be part of it. It's no coincidence that Schopenhauer, Jung, and even Buddha all sought isolation at times, not to escape life, but to see it more clearly. In the absence of external noise, you finally hear the sound of your own essence, and that's revolutionary. Because in that state, you no longer buy from lack, date from loneliness, or silence yourself out of fear. You act with purpose, not autopilot. And as that purpose grows inside you, even the way you walk changes. People notice, even if they can't explain why. The energy shifts, but along with it comes discomfort. Because when you no longer need the world as it is, the world tries to convince you something is wrong with you. And that's when the confusion between loneliness and solitude begins. The confusion between loneliness and solitude is one of the greatest emotional traps of our time. They may look similar, but they come from completely different places. Loneliness is born of lack, solitude of choice. One is the desperation for presence, the other, presence itself. If you're alone and hurting, you seek someone. If you're alone and at peace, you've met yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "True freedom is found in being content with your own mind." It's like the difference between being lost in a barren desert or walking slowly through a sacred forest. In the desert, the silence suffocates. You crave any sign of life, any drop of meaning. In the forest, the silence nourishes. You watch the light filter through the trees, feel the cool air, hear the small sounds around you. Both are landscapes of solitude, but only one feeds the soul. The other dries it out. And here's the key. What turns loneliness into solitude isn't the external setting, but the quality of your presence. Some people are surrounded by friends and still feel deeply lonely. Others spend a weekend alone and return more whole than ever. It's not about physical isolation. It's about intimacy with yourself, with the moment, with what's real. When this distinction finally clicks, everything inside starts to reorganize. The hunger for attention fades. The weight of invitations and replies loses importance. And the energy you once wasted trying to fill a void begins to build something new. That's when the first glimpse of authenticity appears. But authenticity must be cultivated. And that's where the next step begins. Solitude isn't just a break from external noise. It's a mirror. And in that mirror, you begin to see who you were before the world shaped you with comparisons, expectations, and filters. You reconnect with parts of yourself that were forgotten while you tried to please, to belong, or to win. And here's the strange thing. Those parts don't shout, they whisper. Only those who slow down can hear them. In this state, your choices shift. Instead of saying yes out of fear of rejection, you start saying no out of self-respect. Instead of replying out of obligation, you choose silence and feel peace. It's like a compass inside you, broken for years, begins to work again, and it points inward. That's when you begin to act not out of what's acceptable, but out of what's true. Henry David Thoreau, in his time at Walden Pond, showed that sometimes you need to step away from the world to remember what's essential. He wasn't seeking glamour or permanent exile, but clarity. Solitude offers the same, a clearing where authenticity can take root. And make no mistake, awakening isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it hurts, because you begin to see where you betrayed yourself, where you stayed quiet, where you accepted less than you deserved. But only by seeing can you begin to change. That change doesn't come through grand revolutions outside, but through small moments of presence, like writing in a journal and crossing out sentence after sentence until one finally feels like your own. Or simply stopping, breathing deeply, and asking, is this still true for me? These moments birth authenticity, but authenticity without practice is just pretty theory, and that's where the small rituals come in, keys that open giant doors. Solitude deepens when it becomes practice, not just a concept. That's where micro-rituals become powerful. You don't need to vanish into the mountains or live as a monk. You just need small, honest moments each day. 10 minutes of silence in the morning, before the world swallows you, can shift your mind's rhythm. Those minutes prove to yourself that you still control your inner time. Then comes the act of walking without your phone. It sounds trivial, but it's revolutionary. At first, you might feel restless, but soon, something opens. You notice details that were invisible. The sky, the trees, the way the wind brushes against your skin. Thoreau believed simplicity itself was a form of wealth, and maybe your version of Walden is just a 20-minute walk in silence. Another ritual with surprising depth is writing one question a day to yourself. Not to answer it immediately, but to make space for the answer to come when it's ready. Questions like, what am I avoiding? Or what truly matters today? These questions act like small lanterns, illuminating the hidden corners of the mind. Repeated daily, they dismantle autopilot and return you to awareness. These rituals don't separate you from the world, they return you to yourself. And when you inhabit yourself fully, everything changes. The rush eases, the urgency dissolves, the need for approval loses its grip, because now you have roots, and roots bring peace. But peace isn't free. It asks you to unlearn everything you were conditioned to believe, and that process of unlearning is just the beginning. Solitude isn't comfortable at first, but it's where you begin to remember who you really are. Not the version the world expected, but the quiet part of you that's always been there, waiting for space. And once you feel that presence, you can no longer pretend the noise is enough. Maybe since starting this walk, you've noticed a strange blend of peace and confusion, and that's okay. Sometimes before clarity, there's collapse. Not because you're falling apart, but because what was false is finally breaking down. Solitude doesn't destroy, it reveals. And revelation is rarely painless, but it's always freeing. If this spoke to something inside you, share in the comments what has been emerging in your silence. It could be a question, a feeling, or just the sense that something is shifting, because it is. And in the next video, I'll show you why this collapse you fear may be the clearest sign of awakening. If you want to keep going, I'll be here, maybe in silence, but present.